Gene Deal has resurfaced with new claims, and this time, he says key information was left out of 50 Cent's Netflix documentary. According to Deal, there are details he believes the public never saw, what he describes as receipts that were excluded from the final project. The allegations are already drawing attention. They include references to $1 million check, claims of prior awareness surrounding Tupac Shakur, and a timeline involving the Notorious B.I.G. that challenges widely accepted narratives. These statements are now circulating online, prompting renewed discussion. The timing is notable. 50 Cent recently sold his Diddy-focused documentary to Netflix for a reported multi-million-dollar deal. When the series premiered, many viewers expected one individual to appear prominently, Gene Deal. Deal served as Sean Diddy Combs' bodyguard during the height of the Bad Boy era, a period central to the documentary's subject matter. Over the years, he has frequently spoken about events from that time and has positioned himself as a first-hand witness to major moments within the label's inner circle. However, when the documentary was released, Deal did not appear. There were no interviews, no archived footage, and no references to his perspective. That absence has raised questions among viewers, and has now led to Deal publicly addressing what he says was left out. As his statements continue to circulate, attention is shifting from what was shown in the documentary to what may have been omitted, and why.
New Netflix docuseries about Sean Diddy Combs is making headlines for its never-before-seen footage of the music mogul in the days before his arrest. Now, Combs is threatening legal action against the streamer for airing the unauthorized footage. Behind the series is Combs' longtime rap rival 50 Cent and director Alexandria Stapleton, who sat down with NBC News' Chloe Malas ahead of tonight's release.
The narrative circulating now is straightforward. Certain footage did not make the final cut. According to online discussion, this includes conversations, recordings, and details, the type of material that can either significantly increase a project's value or raise serious concerns about its inclusion. As a result, attention has shifted to two key questions: why the connection reportedly broke down, and what some believe was left on the editing room floor. At the center of the speculation are three major claims now being discussed. First, allegations that there was prior awareness that Tupac Shakur was in danger, and that no intervention took place. Second, a $1 million check, described as something seen firsthand and believed by some to be connected to events surrounding Tupac's death. Third, a reconstructed timeline involving the Notorious B.I.G., centered on warnings, missed signals, and decisions that, depending on interpretation, may have contributed to the conditions that led to his killing. Before examining those claims, context matters. The documentary rollout was promoted as a deep exposé, featuring never-before-seen footage and behind-the-scenes material. Its release coincided with major legal headlines, adding to the sense that significant revelations were coming. Online speculation suggested the project was originally intended to be longer. However, what ultimately reached audiences was a 4-part Netflix series. The marketing message was clear: a full accounting of events, including alleged crimes, cover-ups, and unanswered questions. But the most common criticism online is that the most critical material never appeared. Which brings the focus back to Gene Deal. Deal served as a Bad Boy Records bodyguard during the period most often debated in discussions of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry. He has repeatedly described his proximity to events in Las Vegas around Tupac Shakur's shooting and later in Los Angeles around Biggie Small's death. Whether those claims are accepted or disputed, that proximity forms the basis of his public positioning today, a figure tied closely to the era, now speaking openly. And that leads to the central question that continues to circulate. Why was Gene Deal not included in the documentary at all?
To put her on blast because she was telling me, she was saying to me that what I was asking for was crazy and they wasn't spending money like that. I'm talking about you got footage, you got clothing, I was doing footage, I had pictures, all the stuff that I had, you could figure out a way to pay a brother and stuff like that. And then I was telling her about some prices that I've already received and I had the invoices to show it. And then she was calling me like I was lying. I'm like, yo, who do you think you talking to? You know what I'm saying? And she was talking about, there's no way nobody paid. Nobody what? I say, first of all you people come with these documentaries and stuff, the first thing you tell me, y'all tell these people out here that y'all don't pay, and y'all pay. If you can make a picture look like $10,000, $15,000, you know what I'm saying? You can sit here and tell me that you're gonna pay me for my time sitting right down here with y'all. You understand? So then, one thing led to another, and I was like, all right, well then, F you, I spoke to 50, and then she said 50, and this is exact words that came out her mouth. 50 does not determine what goes in and goes out of this document.
The most commonly repeated explanation centers on two issues: money and control. According to accounts circulating online, the production initially sought access to footage and first-hand stories. However, a reported conversation with director Alex Stapleton is said to have shifted the dynamic. The understanding shared afterward was that 50 Cent did not have direct control over compensation or final editorial decisions. Instead, those calls were allegedly being made elsewhere. Sources familiar with the discussion claim the financial figure presented was viewed as insufficient, particularly given the material being requested. The point of contention was value. Exclusive footage. First-hand accounts. Direct proximity to historically significant events. Those elements, according to the narrative now circulating, were seen as worth far more than what was offered. As a result, the decision was reportedly made to walk away from the project and decline participation altogether. However, compensation is not the only factor being discussed. Another issue frequently raised is content omission, specifically, material that some believe would have made the documentary more complex, more controversial, and more difficult to publicly defend. One example often cited is the East Coast-West Coast rivalry. While the documentary addresses the conflict broadly, critics argue it avoids what they describe online as the deeper context surrounding the death of bodyguard Jake Robles, a detail they say could have significantly altered the narrative. That omission has become a focal point in ongoing discussions, further fueling questions about what was included, and what may have been intentionally left out.
Wolf was not the gunman who killed Jake, and Mark Curry knows that to be true. You understand? And East Coast War was more like Helena of Troy. When Puff got mad at Suge for being out there and allowing Misa to come out there to make money, however she was doing it, to feed her family, he vowed down that it's like, yo, I ain't never f***ing with her again, and I ain't never f***ing with him again. Puff and Suge had a conversation behind the House of Blues about was we all right, and Tupac was alive. Tupac wasn't dead. So if it was a war, Suge ain't having no conversation with Puff about we good. I know he could be doing a Hoboken hustle, trying to fool a brother, but had he killed my man or some shit like that, I wouldn't have no conversation with Puff. I'd been like, yo, you know what y'all niggas done? You know what happened? And it wasn't no conversation like that, brother. It wasn't no conversation whereas that, Suge made Puff feel like I'm gonna get you a payback for what happened to Jake. This was more so that Puff, for whatever reason, Suge, for whatever reason he was mad at Puff, and Puff, for whatever reason he was mad at Suge, it was between them two. It wasn't no whole East Coast wanted the West Coast dead, and the West Coast wanted East Coast to dead, because they still was going out, still chilling, still at places with each other. It was Bad Boy, and it was Death Row. It wasn't no East Coast and no West Coast. West Coast dudes were still coming out on the East Coast getting love. East Coast niggas was still going out on the West Coast getting love. It was Bad Boy versus Death Row. And that's what it was, bro. And it was because of the two CEOs. But Suge tried to straighten it out. I gotta get at the Suge. The Death Row East Coast was going to bring in Eric B. It was going to bring in Big D. And those brothers was from the East Coast. So now they was looking for a representative to come to the meeting from Bad Boy so they could straighten out the shit between Pac and Big and Death Row and Bad Boy. And Puff is the one who refused. Puff is the one to refuse to send a representative or either come himself, and got mad at Zip and them because they were in the Mirage on 57th Street partying with Suge Knight. Got mad at them, and Zip hung up the phone on behind that.
But what you mean by Mark Curry? He know who killed Big J?
It was some Jamaican dude from the Bronx. He's dead now. The police ended up killing him at Magic City. I don't know his name, but Mark Curry know that it wasn't Wolf.
But when I was looking at the documentary, Kirk Burroughs, he did confirm that Big, he didn't want to go to LA, and they was actually getting warnings not to go to LA. But Diddy, he wanted to go, man.
My man, yeah, we must have had warnings, man. I didn't know. I knew that we shouldn't be out there in the first.
One name that frequently surfaces in these discussions is Mark Curry, with claims circulating that he believes he knows who was responsible. The narrative being discussed publicly rejects a government conspiracy explanation and instead points to a street-level account. In that version, responsibility is attributed to an individual described as a Jamaican man from the Bronx, with further claims that the suspect was later killed by police at a nightclub known as Magic City. These accounts remain unverified, but they continue to circulate as part of the broader debate. The discussion then shifts to how the larger conflict itself is framed. According to this perspective, the widely used East Coast versus West Coast label is misleading. Instead, the argument presented online is that the real divide was Bad Boy Records versus Death Row Records. Under this framing, artists continued to travel between coasts and collaborate without issue. The core tension, it is argued, existed at the label level, Sean, Diddy, Combs versus Suge Knight, and that rivalry is described as the true source of escalation. Another element repeatedly cited as missing from the documentary is a reported attempt at peace. According to circulating accounts, Death Row Records allegedly sought to arrange a meeting to defuse tensions between Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G. That meeting, it is claimed, never happened due to a lack of response or representation from Bad Boy Records. Supporters of this narrative emphasize that the point is not an allegation of criminal guilt, but rather a question of responsibility. If an opportunity to reduce tensions existed and was not pursued, they argue that decision still carries moral significance, even if it does not equate to direct involvement in violence. That brings the discussion to what many describe as the most controversial section. To be clear, what follows reflects public allegations and long-standing narratives, not confirmed facts. The claim being circulated is that there was prior awareness surrounding events at Quad Studios, and that individuals close to the center of the situation were positioned to observe how events unfolded. The documentary references the 1994 Quad Studios shooting, during which Tupac Shakur was shot 5 times. What critics say was omitted is an alleged detail involving Diddy, Andre Harrell, and Jimmy Henchman being together in Jimmy Henchman's office earlier that same day. In this version of events, Biggie Smalls and his team were reportedly unaware of Diddy's presence there. Diddy was expected to go upstairs to Biggie's recording session but instead is said to have remained behind, monitoring the situation as it developed. These claims continue to circulate online, fueling debate over what was included in the documentary, and what may have been left out.
The whole incident of the Quad Studio shit. Like in the documentary, they was talking about that, right? You know what I'm saying? They talked about the Quad Studio shit. But they didn't mention the fact, and they left it out, that Big and C's did not know that Puff and Andre Harrell was in Jimmy Henchman's office the day Pac got killed. I mean, the day Pac got shot at Quad Studio. Let me repeat that again so it don't get mixed up in the whole thing. They did not mention that Andre Harrell and Puff Daddy and Jimmy Henchman were all in the office together. Puff was on the office because he was trying to spy on Big them, because Big was writing the Junior Mafia stuff and Puff had his publishing. I told this to a couple of people before, I said it before, and you got people that's running with it like they knew the story in the whole 9 yards. You understand? They'll lie and you ask them, how do you know that? Who told you? They couldn't even tell you that. They'll tell you some lie, they did some kind of investigation, but it didn't happen like that. You understand? Puff was there to spy on Big because he had owned Big Publishing, and Big had turned around, and the same people who helped Puff get Big Publishing told Big to turn and put Tatiana or put somebody else's name on his publishing, or give it to Lil C's or whoever, this, that, and the third that he wrote for, so he can get the money from it. So that's how that went down. So they was there to spy on Big. In the interim of him being there to spy on Big, Jimmy Henchman told them that they finna show Pac, teach Pac a lesson, because Pac had owed him some money. So that's why he was up in the studio and was coming to the studio. Pac owed him some money. He was gonna work it off and get some money from doing a song with Lil Sean. And that's what that was about. But Pac was talking greasy to Jimmy Henchman, and Jimmy Henchman wasn't the type of dude that you talk greasy to, alleged, unless you 50 Cent.
So Diddy knew what was gonna happen to Pac.
He knew Pac was about to deal well, yeah. He was there to see it. He was there to see it. He wasn't only there to see Big them. When Jimmy Henchman told him that, he was there to see what's going to happen to Pac. He was there for that. Because had he not been there for that, he would have went up there in the office. He would have went to the studio or the studio session with Big them. He would have went to that studio session with Big them. He knew what room Big them was in. He didn't do that. He was there to see what was going to happen to Pac after Jimmy told him. And that's factual.
The question raised by critics is straightforward. Why would someone feel the need to closely monitor their own artist? The explanation most often centers on money and leverage. According to this narrative, Biggie Smalls' publishing rights were under control elsewhere, and he was reportedly exploring ways to restructure that arrangement. In this retelling, advice was allegedly given to place publishing under another name, possibly a spouse or a close associate such as Lil Cease, as a way to redirect revenue and shift control. Within that framework, the image presented is of Diddy remaining in the office, observing developments rather than attending Biggie's recording session upstairs. The narrative then becomes more specific. According to the claims circulating, a discussion took place in that room involving a debt and what was described as a lesson meant to address it. A studio appearance was allegedly framed as part of settling that obligation, tied to a planned song involving Lil Sean. As the account goes, tensions escalated when issues of disrespect entered the conversation, an element repeatedly described as volatile and unlikely to end quietly. Those promoting this version of events argue that prior awareness existed because, in their telling, these plans were openly discussed in the room. That leads to the question frequently repeated online: if nothing unusual was anticipated, why not go upstairs to Biggie's session? The location of the studio was reportedly known. Yet, in this account, Diddy is described as staying where he was, waiting rather than joining the session. That decision has become another focal point for speculation, adding to ongoing debate about what was known, what was expected, and how events ultimately unfolded.
be him, idolized him off, he idolized Tupac because you gotta realize when a woman looked at Tupac, they probably wanted him. Puff wasn't getting that type of fever from girls. You understand what I'm saying? Puff had to use his money, Puff had to use his position in order to get women. Now I seen him with some bad joints, and I used to look at them like this, like, not on no hating shit, but like, you wouldn't be here if he wasn't puffed.
This portion of the narrative is often promoted as straight facts. However, it is important to clarify that what follows reflects repeated accusations, not independently verified evidence presented in this report. The allegation itself is serious. According to the claims being circulated, there was prior awareness that violence was imminent, yet no warning was issued and no effort was made to intervene. Critics argue this is precisely the type of allegation the documentary chose to avoid addressing. From there, the discussion shifts away from events and toward motive and personality. In this telling, tensions are framed as personal rather than professional. The resentment described is not rooted in music, fame, or industry rivalry, but in personal dynamics involving women. Tupac Shakur is characterized as naturally charismatic, someone who could enter a room and immediately command attention. In contrast, Diddy is portrayed in these accounts as relying on wealth and status to generate a similar response. A specific quote frequently cited within this narrative is attributed as follows: "I don't know how to talk to women. I don't know how to talk to girls." Those advancing this perspective interpret that statement as evidence of personal jealousy, suggesting long-standing resentment that intensified over time. It is important to note that this framing remains interpretive, not factual proof. The narrative then returns to the issue of money, this time not presented as online speculation, but described by those repeating the story as something they claim was personally witnessed. That claim, like the others, remains unverified but continues to circulate as part of the broader debate over what was included in the documentary, and what was left out.
And my man Boondang, aka my man Slick, a check for $1 million. We don't know, and everybody trying to say, lying, talking about half of it got paid, 500. I don't know. I know when I asked him about, we asked him, do we ask? No, we didn't ask him. I know when he showed us the check and he walked away after he showed us the check for the $1 million, you understand? I asked Boone, I said, yo, Boone, when did he get a record label? He said, you know how Zip is. I said, when did he get a Zip record label? Zip had a check for $1 million. He said he got it from Barry Hankerson and Jimmy Henchman for his record label, Black Ground Records. So now, if that's true, we know Jimmy Henchman and Puff was cool. You should be able to trace $1 million if that's the truth. If that's the truth, you should be able.
The setting described in this account is 112th Street. Two individuals are said to be sitting on a stoop when a third person approaches, arriving in a new car and, according to the retelling, visibly eager to show it off. At that point, the story takes a turn. A check is produced, not an ordinary check, but one valued at $1 million. It is described as being displayed openly, almost as a symbol of status. The claim attached to this moment is that the check originated from Barry Hankerson and Jimmy Henchman, with connections to Black Ground Records. Timing is a critical element in how this narrative is framed. According to the account, this alleged display occurred shortly after Tupac Shakur's death, shifting the discussion toward a possible money trail. Not cash exchanged in secrecy, but a financial instrument that would have passed through formal banking systems. The emphasis here is on traceability. A check requires deposits, endorsements, processing, and documentation. In theory, records would exist. And that forms the core challenge being raised by those repeating the story: follow the paper trail. Within that context, another name is introduced as potentially significant: Kirk Burroughs, former president of Bad Boy Records. He is described as someone who maintained detailed notes and records. According to the circulating narrative, Burroughs allegedly referenced payments made to individuals traveling to Las Vegas around the time Tupac was killed. Even within this retelling, limitations are acknowledged. Not every detail is claimed to be personally verified from memory. However, the broader point remains consistent: if financial records exist, they can speak for themselves. The suggestion being made is that documented transactions, who was paid, when, and for what purpose, could clarify long-standing questions. Which leads to the unresolved question that continues to linger. Will anyone ever examine those records, or will this remain buried, as it has for nearly 3 decades?
Help law enforcement on how, if Diddy had anything to do with breaking that money up or giving that money up to him like that. Or did he use somebody else? Or did he do something for somebody else to be able to get that money for that? We don't know.
I was just about to say that too. Keefe D, he can use him for the upcoming trial.
Well, Kirk was meticulous in always keeping notes and files and things like that. But that money can't, just do a trace on $1 million check. Just do a trace on them. I want them to do it, because that would prove that I saw $1 million check. That would prove. Just do a trace on it. The man dead now. What you gonna do? Do it.
The focus now shifts to the events surrounding the Notorious B.I.G's death. This portion of the narrative moves away from financial questions and centers on warnings, movement, and security decisions. In this account, Gene Deal is placed at the scene on the night Biggie was killed, and the timeline being described differs from the simplified version many people are familiar with. According to the retelling, warnings began arriving earlier that night. One call is described as coming from Wesley Wes Hall, known on the street as Unique. At the time, Hall was reportedly incarcerated at a federal prison in Colorado. Despite that, a call allegedly came through, delivering only 2 words before the line went dead: "Vest up." The explanation offered is that three-way calls are quickly detected and disconnected. A follow-up call to the woman who connected the line is said to have confirmed the caller's identity, with the call reportedly originating from Mecca Audio. Shortly afterward, another message is relayed through the same source: "They're coming out. They're coming to get y'all." At that point, security becomes a central concern. Kirk Burroughs is contacted, and additional protection is requested. However, the group is described as having only 4 security guards total for Diddy, Biggie, and everyone accompanying them, an amount portrayed as clearly insufficient given the warnings. According to the account, no additional security was approved. A second warning is then said to arrive, this time from Chaz Williams, delivering a similar message: "They're coming at y'all." Several potential sources of tension are cited as contributing factors, including long-standing disputes connected to the death of Jake Robles, an alleged phone call involving Biggie that reportedly preceded a shooting at a New York location, a separate confrontation involving an argument at Soul Train, and continued street tensions following Tupac Shakur's death. In this narrative, the threat level is treated as real and immediate. The timeline then moves to Andre Harrell's residence, where Diddy was staying. A brief detail is recalled: Diddy coming downstairs wearing a white Beverly Hills hotel robe, before the tone returns to seriousness. A direct warning is delivered: "I've got intel. People are coming to try and kill us." The response described is dismissive: "I don't want to hear that." An offer is then made: "You don't have to go if you don't want to." The group leaves. Another figure enters the timeline: Clark Kent, a DJ and music executive, who is described as having been in Biggie's room the night before. The party later that evening is framed as deliberate rather than spontaneous, with Biggie reportedly saying, "D-Rock and Puff set this party up for me to go to." Outside, the environment is described as tense. High alert. Heavy gang presence. A weapon reportedly concealed behind someone's back. An order is given to get into the vehicle. Resistance is described, followed by an ultimatum: "Get in the car, or lose your job at Bad Boy." The convoy moves. Instructions are reportedly given to the driver: "Run the next 3 lights. Get out fast." Moments later, a warning is voiced: Big's name isn't coming across the light. A gun is raised. Shots are fired. Multiple rounds. Panic. The vehicle accelerates. Shouts follow: "They're shooting at Big." A U-turn is made. Doors open. Everyone exits the vehicle, except Biggie. A chase is described, involving another Suburban, but the shooter's vehicle is eventually lost. Attention then turns to the hospital decision. According to the account, a hospital was located just 2 blocks away. Instead, the group drives approximately 30 minutes to another facility. During that time, Biggie is bleeding heavily. Final moments are recalled: "Don't let him go to sleep. Keep him up." Biggie's last reported words are described simply as, "Just do it." The belief expressed by those repeating this account is that reaching the closer hospital might have changed the outcome, a question that, decades later, remains unresolved.
Could Puff have been involved in Tupac's murder or Biggie's murder?
I think that when you set up an atmosphere for something to happen, how involved are you? You set up the atmosphere. You put people in positions to get hurt. He knew that somebody was going to do something. He was told. I told him before we left. I told him. Mace told him. See, people ain't telling. See, everybody think that Gene Deal is the only one know this shit. I'm not the only one that's know this and privy to this information. I'm the only one that's speaking on it and has spoke on it. Now, people are coming out gradually, but when Puff set up an atmosphere for somebody to get hurt and they get hurt, don't you take some responsibility for that?
Is that more tactics? He's not going to pull the trigger. He might not even pay someone to do so, but like releasing that song Who Shot You, that creates an atmosphere, creating certain things and planting seeds in somebody else's mind to be number one, where Tupac ends up getting killed, Biggie ends up being...
At this point, the focus shifts from direct blame to responsibility. Not an accusation of pulling a trigger, but a broader argument about environment, decisions, and consequences. The claim being advanced is that when individuals help create conditions where harm becomes more likely, they may share responsibility when that harm occurs. That includes placing people in risky situations, ignoring warnings, and refusing opportunities to de-escalate tensions. This is the moral argument underlying the narrative, not that someone committed a crime, but that choices were made that contributed to a dangerous atmosphere. It is also repeatedly emphasized that others were present and witnessed portions of these events. What makes the discussion louder now, according to supporters of this account, is that one individual is willing to speak publicly and consistently. Zooming out, the story points to what is described as fuel added to an already volatile situation. Music releases such as Who Shot Ya following Tupac Shakur's shooting are cited as escalating tensions. Reported refusals to participate in peace meetings are framed as missed opportunities to calm the conflict. Biggie Smalls traveling to Los Angeles despite multiple warnings is treated as another decision that increased risk. Combined with claims that violence was being discussed behind the scenes, the same question continues to surface. If an environment is built where harm becomes likely, and harm follows, does responsibility extend beyond the person who pulled the trigger? Again, this narrative does not accuse anyone of direct violence or payment. It frames events as a chain reaction: situation set up, tensions escalated, warnings ignored, peace declined, leading to a tragic outcome. That leads to the next question: why was none of this included in 50 Cent's documentary? 3 explanations are most frequently cited. First, legal risk. The Keefe D case related to Tupac Shakur remains unresolved. Including unverified accusations in a major documentary could expose the project to lawsuits, defamation claims, or complications tied to an active legal matter. Legal teams often move quickly to remove anything that could create liability. Second, credibility. 50 Cent has positioned the documentary as a serious cultural work. While Gene Deal is seen by some as a compelling storyteller, others question his reliability. Excluding him may have been a strategic decision to keep the series tighter, more defensible, and less vulnerable to criticism. Adding to that pressure, Diddy's legal team reportedly issued a cease and desist to Netflix, calling the documentary a hit piece and raising concerns over alleged use of unauthorized material. From a business standpoint, including additional controversial claims could have increased legal exposure. Third, money. According to the narrative, Gene Deal wanted compensation he felt reflected the value of his footage and testimony. If the numbers did not align, the decision to cut his involvement may have been purely financial. While debate continues online, additional drama has surfaced. One claim circulating alleges that Diddy sent 50 Cent flowers at Club 11 in Miami, not celebratory flowers, but what some describe as funeral-style arrangements. That claim, like many others, remains unverified. Before closing, a reminder: if you're watching Celeb Pulse, subscribe, like the video, and drop a comment. This channel focuses on the context and details that often don't make the final edit. After hearing all of this, it's easy to understand why some people find the narrative compelling: specific details, confidence, and consistency over time. But it's just as important to be clear. These are allegations. This is a narrative, not a verdict. The central takeaway being discussed is that certain material, claims of prior awareness at Quad Studios, the $1 million check, warnings before Biggie's death, and decisions not to de-escalate, was considered too risky to include. Whether that was due to legal concerns, credibility, money, or all three, it did not make the documentary. And now, those claims are being presented directly to the public. So now the question turns to you. Do you find this account believable? Do you think responsibility extends beyond the shooter? And what happens next as these allegations continue to resurface? Let us know in the comments. We'll see you in the next one.